Hello, everyone. Welcome to our presentation. For those coming in, just a full disclosure that this will be recorded and it will be published afterwards. And also for questions, if you have questions, you can put them in the chat box and you can also wait to the end for our Q&A session. But we're going to go ahead and get started. As people are filtering in, we're just going to do a little overview. Thanks. So we are the 2023 Brinsfield Interns, and we are here today because of MPower, which is a program that helps collaborative programs support their youth through different types of research projects, and ours is the Brinsfield Interns. With the Brinsfield Interns, we, as Brinsfield, we are kind of a program by Dr. Russ Brinsfield, who is a co-founder of the Hughes Center. And he was a scientist, farmer, and mayor, which is kind of a common theme that we have seen through all our projects, is that there's definitely overlap in that science and that agriculture and the policy. It's all interconnected. And I think that's a really good kind of foundation that set us up today for our presentation. So we'll go ahead and overview our projects and we can go through our agenda. So we'll do a little meet the interns. We'll introduce the three of ourselves. That way you guys know a little bit about who we are. We'll discuss the projects that we've done over the summer. We'll talk about our experiences, and then we'll do our key skills and takeaways. And in our final remarks, we'll talk a little bit about where we're headed, what our future plans are, and then we'll have time for a Q&A. So meeting the interns. There are three of us this year, and we'll go ahead and start with Marisa.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for coming today. My name is Marisa Koontz, and I am a rising second-year law student at the University of Maryland Carey School of Law. I also just completed my Master of Public Health at Johns Hopkins University, and I went to undergrad at the University of Iowa and majored in English and sociology.
Hi, and I'm Beverly. Thank you all for coming. I'm excited to share our projects with you. I'm a rising junior at the University of Maryland College Park, and I'm pursuing a dual degree in geospatial data science and sociology, and I'm interested in the intersection of the environment, land use, and food systems and food security.
And then I'm Olivia Scuderi. I am also an undergrad at the University of Maryland, and I'm an animal science major, and I have a minor in science, technology, ethics, and policy. And I've grown up on a farm in central Montgomery County all my life, so that's kind of led me into the realm I'd like to be in, which is agricultural policy. And I'm very grateful that the three of us were kind of brought together. I think we all bring a very unique perspective to the table. So I was very excited to work with these people this summer. So going into our projects, we'll go ahead and start with the Agricultural Lease Builder. This is a program done by ALEI, the Agricultural Law Education Initiative, with a grant from MDA, the Specialty Crop Block Grant. And with this grant, they were tasked to kind of assess, because agricultural land is popularly leased, seeing how conservation kind of plays a role in that lease. And my task was to kind of create a memo, just seeing where the data ranges right now between the launch from February 9th to June 30th. We had 70 users and we had 50 that included a conservation plan, which kind of shows that over half of these people are incorporating conservation in some way with their lease. The most popular conservation practice was cover crops. And then the least popular was the agrochemical handling structures. And the idea of the memo for the interns was just to kind of create a resource where the ALEI and the Hughes Center could kind of see where people are at with conservation in their leases and see where they can do more promotion and education to get this tool out there to our farmers. And then going into agrivoltaics, Beverly.
So first, I want to explain what agrivoltaics is. It is the co-location of agriculture and solar panels on the same land. So this could be crops, it could be solar grazing of other animals, or it could be pollinators. And so we were tasked with researching a variety of agrivoltaics questions because Maryland has very aggressive clean energy goals of 100% renewable energy by 2035. So we wanted to look at how solar could meet these energy goals without taking farmland out of production. So we were tasked with a variety of questions, such as what types of crops could be grown under solar panels, how solar grazing, animals grazing around solar panels could work, the economic impact on an agrivoltaics operation, the siting of an operation, And Olivia and I worked together on this project, and we kind of divided it into two parts, where I was looking at the science side of it, researching existing operations and how they configured their solar panels, what types of crops they were growing, the impact on the climate under the solar panels, and Olivia can explain what she was doing.
And then I kind of had the alternate end of looking more at the government system that's in place surrounding agrivoltaics, how it's been receptive in certain states, and kind of looking at it from more of a systems perspective of like, what is the public outlook? What is the farmer outlook? And just understanding more like how receptive can we be to agrivoltaics? How can we implement it? And looking into different routes that different states have taken.
So as we were researching, we came across existing operations, and we wanted to focus mostly on the East Coast of Maryland, areas that had similar climates, the East Coast of the United States, areas that have similar climates to Maryland. So we talked to researchers from Rutgers, from UMass, from NC State, from University of Delaware, and we also were put into contact with solar developers, and we talked to people from a variety of departments in the state of Maryland about potential legislation and the issues with putting agrivoltaics on eased land. And ultimately, there's a very complex dynamic between farmers and policymakers. But a lot of people we talked to were also farmers, so they provided unique perspectives, and they expressed a need to start implementing these operations actually on farms. And as the state seeks to do this, there's going to be a lot of questions that come up, but we created multiple resources that should help the state with this.
So going kind of into like the products that we've created 3 major things. And they are also, because we are still meeting with people, they are in the process of being finalized, so they have not been released yet. But the first one is the entire memo, and this will include everything that we have researched, every meeting we've done, everything that you might need or think of. It is kind of geared toward the Hughes Center's questions as far as agrivoltaics in Maryland. And then we try and incorporate all of the states that we've met with. But I do want to emphasize that it is a working document. It is a document that can be changed over time because this research is so new. It is such a new thing. We cannot finalize really anything in agrivoltaics because it has not yet been wide implemented. So we kind of also wanted to set it up that in case future Brinsfield interns did want to keep working on this project, they would have the ability to use this resource. And this resource would be the primary resource used for our stakeholders and legislators if they needed it. The other 2 are smaller overviews. So we did an overview as a PowerPoint, and then we have an overview sheet. And these will be used for people who may not have had like any exposure to agrivoltaics before and just want a quick synopsis of how it works. So kind of making those resources tailored to different audiences that might need it.
All right. Another project that we were working on this summer is an aquaculture project. The background of this project is that in Maryland, all of the waters are public waters, and for anyone who wants to go in and have oysters and grow oysters on either a water column or on submerged land, they must obtain a lease from the state. However, one of the major obstacles to obtaining these leases are protests that individuals can have where they basically hinder the process of implementing these oyster farms and cause either a delay in the implementation or block the implementation of the lease altogether. So this project was overall looking at the administrative process in Maryland, how long it takes to protest, what the process is for the protest, and then what the usual outcomes are. So some of the project goals for this project were to explain Maryland's aquaculture leasing and protest process. Why are there delays? And then compare and contrast Maryland's protest process with other states. In my research, I looked at over 20 states and how they do their aquaculture leasing protests. And there are in general about 3 types of protest processes that I saw throughout the different states that do aquaculture for oysters. The first is the same as Maryland, which is probably the most lengthy procedure, and that is through an administrative hearing. So the process involves placing ads in newspapers and letting people, the surrounding neighborhood and community know that you are planning on harvesting oysters with a water column or a submerged land lease. And then if they choose to protest, then it goes through an administrative hearing and an administrative adjudication procedure, which can take many years to go through. The second is a special committee, and some states use a special committee instead of the administrative law process to determine whether or not the lease should be approved, and this typically takes less time. And then the third is a predetermined leasing area where the state actually can mark where the leases are going to be allowed, go through the process of protests by the community prior to an individual farmer or industry person choosing to lease that land for oyster aquaculture. So the main product from this project is a memo that I'm still working on that compares the different states' processes and which ones take the longest times, potentially thinking about alternative options for Maryland and future legislative opportunities to make it easier to obtain an oyster aquaculture lease while still respecting the protest process.
So another project that we all worked on throughout this summer was writing blog posts for the Farm Bill Law Enterprise. This is a collaboration between a variety of law schools throughout the country, Harvard, Duke, our Maryland Carey Law School that Marisa attends. And FBLE publishes reports and recommendations for upcoming farm bills. So we were looking at the 2023 Farm Bill. And we had a lot of autonomy in choosing our topics, and we each wrote 2 blog posts to contribute to this blog. I've listed the URL to this on the slide. And we're each going to discuss what we wrote about, and then we'll talk about what we learned from this.
Yeah. So my 2 blog posts specifically focused on recent legislation passed in the last year. The first being the debt ceiling bill that was passed in the spring by the Biden administration, and the Inflation Reduction Act, which was passed last August. So the debt ceiling bill brought new changes to SNAP requirements. That was the first topic of my blog post, or the topic of my first blog post. And those changes to SNAP requirements are going to have some implications for the Farm Bill negotiations this fall, determining, work requirements for individuals and potentially changing the amount of funding that individuals can get for SNAP benefits. The second blog post that I worked on was on the Inflation Reduction Act and the funding that the IRA brought for conservation practices in agriculture. And that funding is also going to be a topic of negotiation for the upcoming Farm Bill, because there is some discussion about whether or not that funding should be part of the Farm Bill negotiations, or if that funding should be kept separate from the mandatory funding for NRCS conservation programs in the 2023 Farm Bill.
And then my 2 were more geared toward a briefing done June 21st that kind of focused on conservation in the Farm Bill, whether it was through wetlands or floodplains, tribal nations, kind of getting an overview. The American Farmland Trust had a representative there. There were 4 panel members that were all from different stakeholder groups, and they all kind of did their take on conservation in the Farm Bill. And I thought it was kind of important to give a synopsis on the blog of this briefing, just so that people can kind of get like a very quick overview of it. And then the second one I did was more geared toward farm viability. As a small farmer in Montgomery County, I kind of had a personal connection to this one just because it is getting very important to advocate for our small to medium-sized farms when it comes at a federal level. So I kind of talked about how with small and medium-sized farmers, there are programs available for these farmers to kind of figure out how to navigate this industry that keeps getting more and more complex every day. So those were my 2 topics.
And then I wrote 2 as well. My first was about agrivoltaics, whereas our research for the other project was looking at the potential for agrivoltaics in the state of Maryland. This post recommended that the federal government incorporates funding for agrivoltaics operations around the country, and looking at, similar to what we were looking at in Maryland, the siting of the operations, economic impacts, the types of crops that could be grown, but this would just be at a larger scale and just focusing on pilot programs. And my other post was about incorporating funding for crop insurance subsidies for sustainable farming practices. So this would include for cover crops, for compost, or others such as no-till farming or crop rotation, because implementing these sustainable farming practices would aim to both help the environment, but also improve the sustainability and the likelihood of these farms to be able to recover from situations like droughts and just promote the overall food system. So it was exciting during this project that we were each able to focus on our areas of interest. And so far we've had 2 posts published and we have 4 more that are scheduled to publish. So it's exciting to have been able to look and to better understand the Farm Bill and the process. I think we knew about it before, but we were able to dive deeper and also to understand how current legislation impacts the Farm Bill. We were forced to stay up to date on current legislation, and it's just been exciting to have this opportunity.
So I wanted to give a little clarification. So we had 2 projects from ALEI, the Agricultural Law Initiative. And the first one that I talked about, the Agricultural Lease Builder, was funded by the Ken Bell Foundation. And then the Decision Trees, which I'm about to talk about, was funded by the MDA Specialty Crop Block Grant. So I just wanted to clarify that from the Ag Lease Builder. But for the regulatory decision trees, ALEI created a resource that would help value-added farmers navigate specialty crops regulatory requirements. So we are actually currently in the process of following up on how this resource has helped farmers by calling all of them and just kind of asking them a few questions about how has that resource helped you? What can ALEI do to further help you? And just overall getting the feedback to create a memo so that way ALEI can use that for further development. And then our takeaway from this was that kind of farmers, we've had a variety of different responses. Some people are people who work with farmers and they work with a lot of them that need the resource. And then we also have very unique type of socially disadvantaged or beginning farmers. So a wide variety of people that we have been calling have been using this tool. And it's important, I think, to give them this tool because the regulatory system is complex, and having something that they can rely on to further their farm and their business we've seen has been very impactful to them as we've made these phone calls.
So another project that we worked on this summer was for the Sustainable Agriculture Research and Education group, and that is called SARE. And this SARE grant proposal was brought to us as a way to hopefully encourage farmers who are now taking more direct to consumer or doing more direct to consumer sales, to encourage those farmers to take SNAP benefits and WIC benefits and Farmers Market Nutrition Program benefits. So this project is in the very beginning stages, and we were sort of compiling the very first pieces of research about these programs in an attempt to sort of understand not only the barriers to accepting these programs, but also the need to accept these programs for farmers in Maryland. So this project goal was to create a resource on Maryland County participation in nutrition assistance programs as a way to share with farmers and individuals in agriculture throughout the state how useful it can be for them to accept these dollars, both for themselves and for the consumers. And some takeaways from this project were that obviously state regions vary widely on SNAP participation. In some areas, you have higher rates of eligibility, and then in other areas, you have rates of eligibility that don't actually match the number of people who are using these programs and benefiting from them. So we would like to see that match up more as well. And also, this helped us understand more the federally collected rates and data collection for supplemental nutrition programs, and just parse through that data to understand the rates of usage for these federal nutrition programs.
Another large project that we all worked on this summer was an urban agriculture project. There's a lack of information on where urban agriculture is allowed in the state of Maryland, so we were tasked by the University of Maryland Extension to research zoning policies, tax credits, and just where this agricultural structures, and anything related to urban agriculture is allowed throughout the state. We started by looking at the current state definition of urban agriculture, and the state defines an urban area as one that's delineated by the US Census or within the boundaries of a municipality, and that those areas don't have to be within the US Census as an urban area. So this expands the definition of where urban agriculture would be allowed from what a lot of people in the state may currently think. We then went into looking at state definitions and found a very limited number of state definitions. Currently, only Prince George's County, Montgomery County, and Baltimore City have defined urban agriculture. But as we dug deeper, we found that in a lot of the counties, agriculture is allowed in urban areas and is allowed more widely throughout the county. They just haven't defined it as urban agriculture. For example, the Eastern Shore of Maryland and Western Maryland have relatively flexible agriculture allowances. And these areas could be somewhere that could take advantage of urban agriculture grants that we learned about from Bill Tharp and Jason Kepler at MDA. And to qualify for these urban agriculture grants, you have to be in an urban area as the state has defined and as I've already said. And there's requirements on how much you have to sell, but this broader definition, as I've said, could provide more opportunities throughout the state. And our matrix that we created that I'm going to show on the next slide could be a resource for people who may not realize they're eligible for urban agriculture and could allow people to start urban agriculture operations. So as you can see on the slide right now, we created a matrix for all of the counties in Maryland, as well as Baltimore City and each of the county seats. And we looked at their comprehensive plans and their zoning codes, zoning maps, and their permissible uses. And ultimately, this isn't shown on the screen, but we put a column for where agriculture is allowed in each county and each county seat, and also where there might be other provisions and other structures, such as greenhouses, or where agricultural retail is permitted. And we're hoping that this will be useful throughout the state, not just in the major cities, and that other smaller municipalities can put this to use.
So as Beverly mentioned, Prince George's County is one of the counties in Maryland where urban agriculture is defined, and it's unique in that it actually has an urban agriculture permitted use that you can have. I believe it's 26 zones within Prince George's County allow urban agriculture as a permitted use. So Prince George's County, the Prince George's Soil Conservation District came to us and asked us to help them create a matrix to allow urban agriculture to be more accessible to individuals who are seeking to implement it, to also create structures on their property for urban agriculture and have financial resources available to them and get more information about these things. So a little bit of background, we wanted to make it easier to navigate starting an urban farm in Prince George's County. And the goals of this project were to identify specific common structures used in urban agriculture. This is a small piece of a larger project that is going to be worked on, but we were focusing specifically on the structure language because those are common problems that come up when people try to do urban agriculture. They either are not allowed to implement the structures that they would like, or they have to go to a board and request some sort of change or variance to their plot of land or the zoning or the permitted uses or the accessory structure uses. And so we were just looking at what are the requirements to implement some essential structures for urban agriculture. And in looking through the Prince George's County Code, there is a lot of leeway. The use of the definition and the zoning use allows individuals to know exactly what they can do or can't do on their property in terms of certain structures. So there are things like high tunnels and hoop houses that are directly written into the code that they are allowed to do. But there are other things like having a produce stand or a wayside stand that have different requirements for different zones. So this project was focused on creating a matrix and a memo for individuals to look at so that they can figure out what they're allowed to do on their property, provide them with some definitions that are useful to let them know how they can do urban agriculture on their land. And hopefully this will make it easier for people to start urban agriculture projects in Prince George's County. And we hope also that this can provide maybe some guidance for other counties to implement urban agriculture in the same way that Prince George's County has in their zoning code. So those were our projects, and throughout this experience, we have had the great opportunity to go visit a lot of different very cool operations, farms. We've gone to all of the places that you see in those pictures. First, we did some aquaculture visits. We went to Friendship Farms, and you can see in the top right picture, that's Bobby Leonard, and he was showing us the oysters that he had just pulled from the body of water that we were in. So that was a really, really cool experience to see how that works and learn from him about his oyster aquaculture operation. We also went to Ferry Cove, where we went with Stefan Abel, and he was showing us their operation where they are raising oysters, and it was a really great experience to see the different stages of oyster production and oyster aquaculture. We also had the chance to go on a couple farm tours, both at the Y Research and Education Center, where we're at right now. And then Olivia and Beverly got to go to the Central Maryland Research and Education Center paint branch, turf grass facility, farm. We also had a visit to the Maryland Department of Agriculture, and we were able to network and have meetings with different departments, organizations, and individuals throughout Maryland. And I think one of the really valuable experiences that we had with this internship was getting to meet with so many different stakeholders, so many different perspectives in agriculture, from production to people who were just working on a farm to aquaculture. I mean, it was just so great to hear from so many different people about, the very diverse agriculture industry in Maryland. And I think something else that we wanted to touch on too was the fact that we are 3 women, and agriculture may not have many women, or it's still, trying to introduce more women into the space and in leadership roles. And so we had the great opportunity to meet with many women in many great leadership roles in agriculture and in leadership roles in general throughout the state. So that was something that was really valuable for us as young women and aspiring professionals in this space, to learn from them and get some guidance. So thank you to everyone on this call who was able to meet with us throughout this experience, because we just learned so much.
And as Marisa was saying, we did learn so much. One of our major takeaways from this experience is the importance of collaboration. And I mean this in so many different senses. One is the intersection of the environment and agriculture. Sometimes they're seen as more separate than they actually are, but they're so interconnected. And so many of the projects that we were working on were touching how they can work together to both promote the environment, but also to promote agricultural production. We also met with, like Marisa was saying, so many different stakeholders, people at so many different levels of the government, farmers, industry representatives, policymakers, and we learned about the importance of collaborating with all of these different stakeholders. And also just, we each come from our own different backgrounds as interns, and we've been able to put our own skills to use. We've been able to teach each other so much, and it's just been a really good opportunity to work together. We also realized that so many of the projects that we're working on address key issues that right now just need knowledge gaps filled, needs met, sorry. And so we've been working to try to keep things up to date in the state of Maryland. Honestly, I didn't know what agrivoltaics was when I first started this internship. So it was super interesting to become so involved in it and to be at the forefront, to be able to present to Maryland things that can be done. And
yeah, as I said earlier, we got a chance to network, meet with so many different people, learn about the importance of communicating ideas and goals, and also, learning about the sort of give and take of working with different stakeholders and, bringing different perspectives to the table. That was something that I think we all were sort of aware of going in, but I think it just creates this like beautiful complexity to the agriculture industry, especially in Maryland, where it's a small state, but there's so many different things happening here for agriculture. And with, you have the government also playing a role and policymakers, as Beverly said. So it was a great opportunity for us to network with a bunch of different people in so many different areas of ag.
And I think that ties really well into how research is complex itself. I think like as students, we're kind of always taught like study for an exam, do the exam, it's done. But research just doesn't work that way. Reality doesn't work that way. There are always more questions. There are always more things that you can dig on. And I think this internship really taught us that like it's okay to have knowledge gaps still, because there's always going to be more questions. So I think it's really important to just kind of acknowledge that and understand, like with the agrivoltaics, creating a working document instead of a final document, like understanding that these are all things that will continue through time and we can make an impact as much now, but it is almost more inspiration to how we can continue to make an impact through our future careers. So we wanted to thank you all again for coming. I do want to thank the Agricultural Law Education Initiative and the Hughes Center and the College of Agriculture and Natural Resources for the University of Maryland. These are the three major partners that have made it possible today, along with MPower, that is the overarching thing that has really made this possible. So we'll go over our future plans and then we'll take comments and questions. So Marisa, if you want to start.
Yeah, so like I said earlier, I'm a rising second-year law student at the University of Maryland. I'm set to graduate in 2025. I am going to be taking some courses in the fall focused on public health, on food and drug law, and I'm doing a clinic that's called the Medical Legal Partnership Clinic, and I'm hoping to continue in the food space. I'm very interested in food systems and food justice, so I will hopefully be working in this area for a long time. Thank you all so much for coming, by the way.
And I have 2 more years left of undergrad. I'm not sure where I want to go after that, but I know, especially from this internship and other opportunities that I've had, that I want to use the skills that I'm learning as a geospatial data science major to apply to these same issues, maybe coming from more of a technical side. But I'm inspired by all of these new skills that I've learned, and I'm just excited to continue and to have more experiences and see where I want to go.
And then I've always had an admiration for agriculture growing up on a farm. And I feel like because of the amount of experiences that I have had growing up and the foundation I've had in it, I really do want to pay it back through a policy or law career for agriculture. So I'm a rising senior now, so I'll be applying to Maryland Carey Law School being one of them, and a variety of other law schools to look into different environmental and agricultural clinics and see where I will end up. And hopefully from there, kind of going forward, being an advocate for agriculture in this state is very important to me because of how much it has done for me growing up. So thank you again for coming. And then we'll go ahead and switch to the next slide, which has a QR code with our LinkedIn, so you can add us, and then our emails as well. So now we can open the floor to questions, and we can also check the chat box as well.
Okay, so one question from Rachel Jones is, where can we find more information on the ALEI decision tree?
So that would be going to the ALEI website and just overall looking at the page and seeing where you can find the value added resources. I believe University of Maryland Extension also has a page for these resources. But I think the best way to get your answers is to contact the directors. Megan Todd is the main person behind the decision trees. So getting in contact with her would be your best bet for the most direct source of information.
Thank you.
And if anyone wants to go on mute and say a question, feel free to. But it's up to you guys.
Hello, ladies. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Hello.
Steve McHenry with Morbidco. Great job. Really informative. And agrovoltaics is certainly a hot topic right now. Based on your research, what animal species hold potential promise in the real world with the deployment of solar arrays in grazing fields? Did you come to any conclusions on that?
For animal grazing species, the most thing that we found common is sheep and cattle. When we talk to researchers, horses are kind of not really on the table right now just because of how finicky they can be. So most companies will usually give you a set height for your panel, and that'll be corresponding to whether you are doing cattle or sheep. But those are the two major ones that they are focused on right now.
Yeah, and we've looked at different panel configurations that would work with solar grazing, like putting panels on fences or raising them to a height that the cattle can graze under. So there's a lot of different options and opportunities that are currently being researched.
And I'll also mention that goats, because they are a little more destructive or a little more curious, they are not as popular. People like sheep a lot better over goats.
And is this being deployed at all in Maryland right now? Do you know?
So we have talked to solar developers that are working with farmers in Maryland. I don't know how far along the projects are. Mostly what we were looking at was existing operations elsewhere to inform potential new funded projects in Maryland.
Very good. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your question, and we welcome any more questions as well if you want to unmute or type in the chat. Okay, so one question from Ian says, you've talked about some of the administrative hurdles that need to be overcome in order for people to have urban agriculture. Can you speak on some of the other barriers they may face in starting an urban garden and how difficult you see those hurdles being able to be overcome? I can speak on this a little bit. One of the major issues that we're seeing right now are, well, I guess I'll talk about two major issues. The first is funding. We know that it can be expensive to start an urban garden or start urban agriculture on your plot of land. The state of Maryland is actually coming out with some new grants for urban agriculture in, I believe, next year and the year after. They're going to be bringing out those grants. And I think too, just letting people know that urban agriculture is possible is also one of those barriers. And getting funding out to different areas because it can be expensive, especially to connect your electric and your water for your operation, and then to also get sort of the resources to have a sustainable urban agriculture operation, something that can last a while, that can require maybe a greenhouse or something like that that needs to be connected to those infrastructure lines. Another hurdle is, as I talked about with the Prince George's County matrix, just the zoning requirements and learning about what you are able to do on your plot of land, I think can become a barrier for people, because in some cases, we've heard of people trying to do certain practices on their land and then either being told by the government or the city that they are unable to do those things, or they need to request some sort of variance. And then there's sort of the administrative process that goes along with changing whatever regulations they are allowed to do on their piece of land. So those are, I would say, the two main things are funding and the zoning issues. But, you know, we're very hopeful that tools like the ones that we've researched and are creating, and, you know, other organizations that are working on similar things are going to make it easier for people to implement urban agriculture and sort of bring that more to the forefront of farming. Any other thoughts? I think you covered that really well. Okay, great, thank you. Okay, we have another question. Ray, your research on farmers' acceptance of nutrition benefits, do you know when a final product will be available? I don't think we have a full timeline for that unless either of you.
We were currently working on the beginning of this project. We were providing background information. We were collecting information on these levels. And we've created sort of a sheet with all of this information, but we're still working to add information to it. And we're working to continue this project into the future. But like Marisa said, no, I'm not sure of that.
Yeah, we don't have a final deadline, but that is a Sarah project. So once we're done being interns, Sarah will continue to work on that project and sort of develop it further for the potential hope that farmers will take more of these benefits in the future. We think that would be a really great thing. Did you find any common business models being used by urban farmers to support their operations? We didn't really focus on the business side of things. We focused more on the governance and the regulation side. I just know in my personal experience with urban agriculture, there are many different business models that you can have. They sort of span from maybe a larger scale operation where you have a plot of land and the entire purpose of the plot of land is for urban agriculture, to individuals who just want to have urban agriculture in their backyard while they have a single family dwelling on the lot. So it can definitely vary in the business models, but that wasn't necessarily the focus of our research. So I don't have a clear answer for that. Either of you have anything?
I think that there are just a variety, like you're saying, of different approaches, and some of them are more high tech and up and coming, but so many urban farmers are still using traditional technologies, and that also needs focus.
Yeah. Any other questions either in the chat or over the sound speaking?
Yeah, this is Ken Staver at the Y. Enjoyed your presentation. So on the photovoltaic, the agro photovoltaic. So I think a lot of farmland preservation programs are have a dim view of installation of photovoltaic. Do you know, with the agro part of it added, is there any discussion about some allowances for photovoltaic installations if there's an agricultural component to it on land that's in preservation programs?
Yeah, we've looked at this both in the state of Maryland and in other states. A lot of the states have similar approaches of right now waiting and seeing, but we do know that on some eased land in Maryland, agrivoltaics operations are allowed to provide energy for just the farm that it's on, and there's the potential in the future for commercial operations to be allowed. But like in Maryland and in some other states, we're looking to see how agrivoltaics works, but it in the future could be considered differently from just a solar farm or just replacing agricultural land with solar.
Yeah, and I think right now it's not yet developed to be added like into code or legislation just yet. I mean, I think there is a possibility with this upcoming legislative session to see something more geared toward being more friendlier to it. But as far as trying to get it into county codes, I just don't think it's there yet. So I believe that issue may just need a little bit more time to kind of like let these farmers experiment in the state of Maryland a little bit more and kind of work out the quirks here, because it is such a kind of like new thing that people don't want to yet jump into. It is kind of a risk to take.
Yeah, and we do know that it's been discussed in organizations or departments throughout the state as something to consider on eased land in the future.
Okay, thanks.
Does anyone have any other questions for us on any of our projects, our experience, anything like that? If there are no other questions, I would just like to take this moment for all of us to extend a thank you to the three people that we worked with very closely: Nancy Nunn, Sarah Everhart, and Megan Todd. Thank you so much for all of your help with these projects, for your oversight and your guidance, and everything that we've learned from you has just been amazing this summer. So thank you very much.
So thank you.
Thank you guys.
All right, if there's no more questions, then
Have a great day, everyone.
Yeah.
Thank you for attending our presentation.
thank you so much.